So, herzlich willkommen. Welcome to the second presentation of the stream Investment and Portfolio Management Trends. We have Aveesh Acharya from Bloomberg talking about ESG risk management and supply chain. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Perfect. Yeah, lovely, thank you. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to this presentation on mastering ESG risk management in supply chains. So really in this presentation, we're going to discuss how a growing number of our clients are realizing the need that ESG analysis is not just at the company level, but now has to also move on to the whole supply chain or the value chain of the company as well. And what we're going to do is discuss, well, you know, why is this the case, right? And then also, well, what's the solution for this? What data is out there to meet this particular need? So my name is Aveesh Acharya. I work as an ESG market specialist at Bloomberg. So in my role, I'm speaking to clients all over Europe about where their ESG goals are for 2024 going forward, and where the challenges and gaps are as well. I've been at Bloomberg for 4 years. Prior to that, I spent 13 years in the sell side developing our derivative product offerings and integrating ESG into our product offering as well. Okay, so now throughout this presentation, you're going to see this QR code. It's going to be at the bottom of the slides as well. Really, the idea of this QR code is if there's anything that you see that's particularly of interest to you, and you want to find out more, please scan it. It should take you through to an app where you can reach out and somebody from Bloomberg can get in touch with you and we can dive into things deeper together. Okay, now, so over the next 30 minutes, what we're going to do is look at initially the why that we discussed before, the growth in the importance of supply chain in ESG analysis. What's driving this growth? What's behind it? We'll then talk about, well, okay, we've got this particular need. Where's the data for it? How can we find the data to meet the actual demand to analyze the supply chain? We'll look at that, and then we'll move on to actually combining. Okay, in the supply chain, it's not just about the company you are working with, but also that company, your supplier, where are they actually located? It's really important in terms of the ESG analysis. And so we'll talk about how can we take the insight one level deeper by combining supply chain data with physical asset location data. And then finally, we'll try to look at the data in action itself through a little demo, because I'm sure you're going to see lots of PowerPoints today. So I thought maybe we can try something different and give you a proper real life demo so you can get a real feel and explore this data as well. Okay, so now let's move on and talk about the importance of incorporating supply chain analysis into your ESG processes. And really try to understand the reason. Why are investors actually doing this? Okay, so as we mentioned before, at Bloomberg, we've seen a real surge in the interest, in the demand for supply chain data. And the question is, well, why is this? Where's this demand coming from in the last few years in particular? And actually, there's a number of reasons for this. So first of all, in the last few years, a big demand has come on the back of the Russia sanctions, right? There's lots of imperatives from governments to make sure companies, investors are monitoring any attempts to circumvent the sanctions processes. Are suppliers or customers upping their orders in order to pass on goods to areas where maybe they shouldn't be? Sanctions, one area. But more importantly, identifying ESG risks in supply chain. So one example a lot of clients always ask me about is Volkswagen and human rights abuses in China. What's the link between the two? How can you find that link as well? Well, here's the example of the story. Where's the data driving this? Okay, so that's a big demand. But then also, from a regulatory perspective, the German supply chain law, which requires you to monitor and analyze human rights in your supply chain as well. All of these are drivers of demand for high quality supply chain data. Now, of course, scope 3 goes without saying. It's all about analyzing the full value chain. A big demand for supply chain value. Who are your suppliers? Who are your customers? What is your scope 3? Big demand coming from measuring climate risk scope 3 emissions. And then the big elephant in the room, biodiversity. So biodiversity, we've had new regulations, TNFD, CSRD, EU deforestation regulation. All of these are putting more imperative on investors to analyze not just the company, but the whole supply chain. We'll look at it later on. Nestle, a company in Switzerland, but where does it get its cocoa from? Is that in an area of biodiversity loss? Well, we can only find out if we know the supply chain of cocoa to Nestle. Biodiversity, really big topic there as well. Okay, so we've talked about really the why. Okay, so this is what's driving the demand for supply chain data. Okay, let's move on to talk about what data is available to help you meet those particular needs. Okay, so here at Bloomberg, we have developed a data set that covers the supply chain of over 120,000 companies. Okay, now this consists of over 28,000 public companies, 93,000 private companies as well. All in all, over 500,000 different supply chain relationships. That's quite interesting, okay? But the really smart part of this data is really the fact that supply chain, this is sensitive information for companies. There's no single data source out there where you can just pull in who's the supplier for a company, who are the customers of a company. This is sensitive information. So the question is, how are we doing it at Bloomberg? How are we building this data set to give you a full supply chain picture? Well, the answer is actually here. We are sourcing this supplier information from lots of different parts, lots of different areas in the media. Things like company websites, spoken transcripts of the CEO in earnings calls, public filings, press releases. We're assembling all the little pieces of the supply chain jigsaw and bringing it together into a full picture that looks something like this. So this is what our supply chain data set looks like on the terminal itself. Why don't we actually have a look? Okay, so this is a picture, but let's go in here and let me show you a bit about it. So now I've switched to the terminal. And what you can see here is I'm looking at Airbus over here. On the left, who are their key suppliers? Who are their key customers? Okay. Now, what you see here is we've actually quantified how much of the supply chain we've actually managed to measure, so you can understand what percentage of the supply chain we've captured. But most importantly, and this is a general principle around Bloomberg data overall, we're very focused on transparency. Now here, for example, I'm saying Honeywell is a supplier to Airbus. Do you agree, disagree? I don't know, okay? But I can answer the question. Where did this data come from? Where did this link come from? If I click on this, you'll see here, relationship source, Honeywell's financials. And if I click on this white square, what this will do is take us through, when it opens up, to the original source document where we've picked up that piece of the jigsaw of the supply chain. And you see here, 737 MAX, Boeing, A320neo, right? This is what Honeywell is providing products for. And by the way, I mentioned Boeing 737 MAX. I'm talking about Airbus, but I know Boeing, right? So this is actually a really interesting story. When the Boeing 737 was grounded by the FAA, one of the things we noticed was a huge surge in the supply chain data functionality and clients asking for this data, simply because they wanted to know, if the 737 is grounded, which supplier is going to lose money because orders will stop? Which customers are going to potentially suffer because they can no longer fly their planes? So a real world example where we saw the demand surge for supply chain data itself. Okay, now, of course, most people, I showed you this data on the terminal, but most people, as you can probably guess, I'm sure lots of your firms and organizations as well, it's not just about the Bloomberg terminal. You want to feed this data into your in-house systems. That's where a lot of the analysis actually happens. Now, this is not a problem because at Bloomberg, yes, all the data that we show on the terminal is our GUI. The same data from our database is available as data feeds into your in-house systems. through your normal delivery mechanism, FTP, API, cloud, and so on. So this is all possible. So this is an example of an in-house system driven by the same data that we show on the Bloomberg terminal. So in this example, a client has taken 5 of our different data sets, climate change, supply chain, as you see over here, 5 of our different data sets, and combined them to build this very nice application here to analyze supply chain risks in a whole ETF in one go. So you can see here, you put in the ETF name, and you choose what area of supply chain risk do you want to focus on. You know, is it credit risk, sanction risk, climate risk, and so on? Do you want to analyze suppliers or customers? And then the app spits out an overall risk exposure relative to a benchmark, right? So this is just an example. And then you may find, well, actually, one company is a particularly high contributor to risk. I need to understand it more. And so what this app then does is it allows you to identify, in this example, who are the top suppliers for climate risk, top suppliers contributing to climate risk. Click on it, and then they've built this nice visualization of the company, the suppliers, and so on. These are all kind of just ideas of how, it's all just data, but how you piece it together is really the clever part of it. Okay, now, when it comes to analyzing ESG risk in supply chains, a key need is to not just analyze the company, but also analyze where the company is specifically located. So, for example, in the European deforestation regulation, is the supplier of a commodity to Nestle, for example, is that supplier located in the area where biodiversity is being lost, where maybe trees are being cut down and there's deforestation? This is EU deforestation regulation, right? This is things really the market needs to deal with. How do we deal with it? Well, again, the data is here. So again, here at Bloomberg, we've built out a very comprehensive data set around physical asset locations of companies. So we're actually covering over 260,000 facilities linked to 12,000 companies globally. And you see that on this image over here. Now, once you've got that data, what you can do with it, what other clients are doing with it, is really analyzing physical risk, geopolitical risk, and ESG risks within the supply chain. So physical risks, is my cocoa producer's farm or plantation, is it at risk of heat wave or drought? In which case, I better look for another supplier. Geopolitical risk, am I building does my supplier have a factory in an area of, I don't know, political instability? ESG risk, Volkswagen. Right? Is my supplier in an area or it has some kind of human rights issues? Right? So all of these things, is the supplier located in the country less prone to support human rights itself? So all this data is there, okay? And again, this data is visualized on a terminal, as you see over here. But again, all of this data can also be fed into your in-house systems, as you see over here. So this is what a large number of our clients are doing. They're taking this physical location data, combining it with supply chain. Look at this one, okay? So in this application, the client has built this thing. You can type in a company. In this example, it's Volkswagen, and I want to analyze the supplier network. Okay, and what this allows you to do is not just plot the locations of Volkswagen's particular facilities, but take it one tier down as well. Show me every location of Volkswagen's manufacturing plants and each of their first tier 1 suppliers as well. And then maybe in this area where we've got the human rights abuses in China, as we saw in that press article, now we can go in and combine it with other data, overlay this data with things like TNFD commodity risk data, maybe human rights data. It's all about, again, how you piece together that jigsaw puzzle of data. But all the input is there for you as well. Okay, so we've looked at supply chain. We've looked at bringing together the physical asset data, maybe let's look at the actual data in action itself. So in this example, I talked about it before, where we have Nestle. Nestle sits in Switzerland. It makes very nice chocolates for us, okay? So it sounds all very good, but again, really the question is, where is that cocoa coming from? EU deforestation regulation, is that cocoa coming from an area where we are losing forests? How does the data come together to help us with that? Okay, so let's have a look at this. So if I go back to the terminal, okay, so I've got the terminal here again, and this time I'm going to take it to Nestle. Nestle, again, I've got here the key suppliers, key customers, exactly as we saw with Airbus. But now what I want to really focus you on is, it's nice to have the visual, but what we really want is data, and let's call it maybe like clever, deeper insights. So by combining data, so instead of looking at a chart, we're going to the table. Now what this table is showing you are different combinations of data. So in this example, I've got here an overview of Nestle's suppliers. But now if I combine our supply chain data with our physical asset location data, I can see here the typical makeup of Nestle's suppliers. Where are they located? Primarily in the USA, followed by, I think it says China. That's combining physical assets data. If we combine supply chain data with maybe ESG data, now I can see, well, who is Nestle's riskiest ESG supplier? Let's do that. So if I combine it with Bloomberg's ESG score and scroll to the bottom of the list, right, I can see here these certain suppliers here have very low ESG score as well. So now we're trying to build more analysis there. And then the one we're really looking for, what if I combine my supply chain data with actual commodity sales data and product revenues? Commodities. Who is providing cocoa to Nestle? Well, we can go in here, and if I think this says cocoa. If I click on that, right, we can see here the key cocoa suppliers to Nestle. And let's take one of these. Let's take this company in Indonesia, Sinmar Mas. If I click on that, and then I click on company map, so now we're combining supply chain with commodities with a map visualization. And if we give it a second to load up, what this will do when it pops up is actually show for us a map with the, here we go. Okay, so here with the dots showing exactly where the locations of this supplier are. Okay, I'm going to try to zoom this in. Okay. Here. So all these supply chains, so these are maybe where the cocoa plantations are in Indonesia. Final question. Let's take it back to TNFD. Let's take it back to biodiversity. Which of these yellow dots are in areas of biodiversity loss, maybe deforestation, maybe water stress, maybe drought risk? All of these things are interesting for definitely the company to know, but an investor into the company to know as well. So what I can do is actually overlay this data with, for example, let's say here, look, drought risk. Now, if I click on that, okay, now you see this additional data about drought risk coming from the World Resources Institute, combined with the yellow dots. So we can actually start to make sense what percentage, what number of facilities owned by Nestle's suppliers are at risk of maybe disappearing over the next 10 years. If this is an issue, maybe find different suppliers, maybe encourage Nestle to pressurize their supply chain. Yeah, it all goes back to this main ESG risk as well. Okay, so look, this is on the terminal. Okay, so I showed you data on the terminal. But again, as I mentioned before, all this data that is on the Bloomberg terminal, the terminal is just a showcase for our data. If you want to look at, well, what data can I get from Bloomberg as a data feed through FTP, through API, through cloud, and so on? I don't know if you've seen this before, but we have a, what do we call it, a data feed, a Bloomberg data feed catalog. And this is basically like a big Amazon website of all Bloomberg data feeds. That's what I like to call it. And so if you type data go on the terminal, it will bring up this website where you can actually browse through all the different data sets available on through Bloomberg itself. This is if you have a terminal, you type data go and it will open the website. If you don't have a terminal and you would like to maybe explore, play around, what does Bloomberg have to help me and my stakeholders for whatever data need? Scan the barcode and have someone reach out to you. You can also have a direct login set up to give you access to this website. Play around and then we can always talk some more as well. Okay, now the final thing, which is also very important. I've been talking a lot about combining data sets together to give you much deeper insights, right? This makes complete sense, but it's very easy to say, much harder to do. When you start combining different data sets, it creates a new challenge where maybe data structures are different. If you're combining data from different third-party data providers, maybe the identifiers you are receiving are different. There's a big job involved in terms of stitching data together to create a nice, usable data set. This is definitely a challenge. In fact, it's such a challenge, we actually dedicated resources to solving it for you. And the product is called Bloomberg Data License Plus. Essentially, what it does, all your inbound different data sets, they come in as individuals. But then what we have done, because we have lots of security master data around identifiers and so on, we can then stitch together all the different data sets into a single unified data model. A single identifier that you query will give you results across all the different data sets. So think of it as taking the inputs, creating a single normalized, clean database table that you can query and retrieve. So it gets cleansed, unified, normalized, and then made available to you in your normal data feed process, which then ends up in your final application. It's a big efficiency drive to implement this kind of system, to automate it, take it away from manual processes. And this is technology we've developed for our own in-house usage, and we're also making it available to our clients as well. Again, if there's something, pain point you can relate to, please, scan the barcode, you can reach out, happy to talk about it in more detail. Okay, great. So that brings us really to the end of the presentation. And as we discussed, we're seeing a big surge in demand for supply chain data, physical risk data, all kinds of different data sets. But the big elephant in the room is biodiversity. This is probably the singular biggest driver of supply chain location data across all the clients I speak to in Europe. So it's definitely worth knowing there's a solution. If it hasn't hit your desk yet, probably very likely soon you will be asked, where does this data sit? Where can we find solutions for this? So at Bloomberg, it's really important for us that we develop we provide the right data to meet our clients' needs. So that's exactly what we're working on. And we have supply chain data, physical risk data, and so much more. It's all on that enterprise catalog. Please do reach out if you would like to find out more. I'll leave you with this QR code. If there's anything that maybe struck a chord with you, anything you want to find out more about, please scan it, reach out to us. We've got the Bloomberg team at the back of the room and around this hall. We also have a booth upstairs. I think it's upstairs, or it might be downstairs. This place is like a maze. I'm trying to work out where everything is. But please do come over, say hi to us, and we'd love to talk you through in more detail wherever your needs are. So that's it from me. Thank you for your attention. Hope it was interesting, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.
So thank you very much. I don't know if you have any question to ask right now or just meet. Sweet.
Yeah, I'm Matteo Aldani from your CFO, your group, a group of fractional C-level. one question that I have is about the supply chain. If there is a way to get, since you may have a lot of clients, and there's a lot of clients that are the center of the starting point of supply chain, if there is any dashboard that show 2, 3, 4, 10, let's say 10 companies with on the right or on the left the component of upstream and downstream with how many high risk, low risk, and medium risk you have in your upstream and downstream company. Just a short dashboard at the impact.
Yeah, really this is like a specific use case of the supply chain data. So the supply chain data is really the foundation of all your analysis, and then how you assemble that is kind of open to you, your data scientists. So if I understand your question correctly, it's about identifying what are the top 10 risks within a group of suppliers?
Yeah, for example, if you have 10 companies, client, center company, and then there is, let's say, for each company, 100 suppliers, 100 of customers.
Yep.
Before going on each one, what would be nice that have already a short dashboard.
Yeah.
Say, this company 3, is the most risk to analyze because she has 10 risk.
Yeah. This is spot on. In fact, that one I showed earlier, okay, it's gone. But that example app I showed earlier, you can actually choose what tier of the supply chain do you want to, how far down do you want to go, and then rank up your risk exposures to credit risk, sanction risk, climate risk, and there's one more. Rank them up and show me who are my top 10. That way you focus your resources on finding those, on the most risky companies in that supply chain. So it's how you piece that data together, but it has been done before. We can definitely do a follow-up and show you that. Thank you.
So we have time for one question.
I'm Markus from Raiffeisen Bank International. One question regarding the resolution on the physical risk facility. How many meters is your resolution on that one?
Yeah, so we didn't. So we looked at the supply chain locations, and I overlaid it with data from the World Resources Institute. We have another data set called physical risk, which is using the CMIP6 climate risk models. And so it depends on the risk. Things like flood go down to like 6 meters square, and they're very tight. Heat waves are more like 60 square miles or kilometers. So it depends on the specific risk. And yeah, I mean, it depends on the risk. For flood, we're looking quite tight. It goes down to like, I think it's like in meters, 600 square meters for flood, because that's very sensitive. Heat wave is much broader as well. And it's also a function of the CMIP6 models that drive this. We've got a really interesting partnership with a company called Risk Thinking AI, who provide this climate risk data. If you'd like to find out more, please pop up upstairs and we can talk about it more. Thanks for the question.
So, thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you.
If there are any other questions, join at the Bloomberg booth upstairs. It's S10, I think.
Yeah, S10. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.